Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Memorial Data Dive Show. We have a lot to get into. We're going to take our first look at the forecast for Dublin, Ohio this week. We are going to look at some prior leaderboards, figure out the shot types, the metrics, the types of players that generally succeed around Jack's Place, and of course I will dig into some of the research that I posted on social media earlier today. So we got a lot to cover. Let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out FantasyNational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where, as I just alluded to, I posted some research around the previous winners of the Memorial going back to 2012, the pattern that they all share leading into the tournament, and the players in the field this week who fit that criteria. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests I play. That comes out every Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. I fired off a few wagers on some players at prices that I liked today. So if you want to see my weekly betting cards and my top player usage, then give me a follow over at X. Lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. And if you are a subscriber to that article, which is free to do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat every Wednesday night as we continue the DFS talk after calls. It was a very interesting discussion last week as him and I were seemingly nowhere near each other, so was wanting to hear from everyone and see who was right or who everyone thought was right, Gabe or I. So every week we have a fun discussion over there. He's gracious enough to host me, and we continue the Substack, and we continue the DFS talk, I should say, in his Substack chat. And the only way you are able to join us is if you subscribe to his article. So go do that and show him some support. Follow him over on social media. Lastly, we're live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Did you make any wagers for the Memorial? If you had success at the RBC Canadian, feel free to jump in chat or put it in the comments. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community who have success. What do you think plays well here? How do you think the course is going to play? Is it going to be as tough as it usually is? Do you think it gets a little bit easier? Just want to hear your all's takes for the Memorial. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 Memorial. And we start over at Windfinder. Soon as, there we go, my camera decides to focus. The extended forecast for Dublin, Ohio and the Memorial this week. I don't know why my camera decides it doesn't want to center often. Thursday looks like we could get some gusty winds, perhaps maybe even into the upper 30s, towards the end, or the upper 20s, maybe touching 30 at the end of the day come Thursday, and quite a bit of wind, sustained and gusts for Friday. Now Saturday looks like the wind dies down a little bit, and then some very, very volatile winds come Sunday. So again, with this being a signature event, a very, very limited field and a very limited cut, very, very doubtful we're going to have a half of the draw to focus on. But it does seem that wind is going to play a factor potentially in the few players that get cut. So we're going to make sure that players are pretty sound in at least moderate conditions, and then it does appear like we're going to have some gusty winds throughout Thursday and Friday, and especially on Sunday. But still too far in advance to dig into the super forecast. So when we move to Fantasy National, I have the moderate and windy conditions filters selected. You will also note that all of the players are in the or have been loaded into the field this week. I still have the 3 players that did not qualify: Pearson Coody, Mac Meisner, Tavis Thompson starred for the evening. That way, if they do happen to pop on a metric, we know that they aren't in the field. But in moderate and windy conditions, in the past 2 years, our top performers have been Scotty, Victor Hovland, our defending champion, Rory, Patrick Cantlay, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Corey Connors, and Denny McCarthy. There's our top 10 in terms of moderate and windy performance. Something else that we can absolutely look at. We took a quick look at this last night. Let's take a look at long courses. Gosh dang it. I said long courses and I clicked 72 to 74. Over 7,400 yards, considering that the official scorecard lists Muirfield Village at over 7,500 yards. So on long courses, our top performers have been Xander, Scotty, Rory, Max Homa, Sung Jae, Akshay Bhatia, Wyndham Clark, Sahith Theegala, Ben On, and Victor Hovland. So a little bit of an overlap. Of course, Scotty's going to be number one or close to it in majority of any overarching total performance filters, considering the run he has been on in the past 18 to 24 months. Victor Hovland, top 10 in both windy conditions and on long courses. I believe Rory was top 5 in both as well. Xander, top 5 in both. And one of the big things about the Memorial is that it is truly set up to be a major-esque style difficulty of a course. So it's no surprise that we see the premier players on the PGA Tour really rise and perform well here. We look at some previous champions that aren't on the PGA Tour anymore. Bryson, John Rahm, these players have been at the heights of the game of golf. Of course, Victor, in the run he was on last year, Patrick Cantlay has consistently been a top 10 player in the world. So the cream of the crop, so to say, generally rise and play well at Muirfield. The other overarching filter that I am going to take a look at is difficult relative to par. I understand that this is a Jack Nicklaus course, obviously, but there isn't a whole lot of data in here. We have Muirfield, of course, Valhalla from this past PGA Championship, the Honda or the Cognizant Classic this year and last year. And those are really it. We do get one round from the American Express on the Nicklaus Tournament course, but really there's kind of 3 courses that make up the Jack Nicklaus subset of data. The Memorial, the Honda, or the Cognizant Classic from this year, and this year's PGA, and that's about it. So instead of looking at Jack Nicklaus Designs with its very limited data set, let's just go ahead and take a look at difficult relative to par. The Honda, the Cognizant Classic, generally a very, very difficult test of golf. We looked at this last night, but just as a quick reminder, I mean, the Memorial has been difficult every round going back to 2020. And then 2019, the first round was difficult. So it's been very, very difficult the past few years. Now, the PGA wasn't necessarily as difficult this year, but Valhalla generally, I mean, it is a PGA Championship. You would have thought it would have been difficult to begin the week. I think it's apt to say that the majority of Jack Nicklaus Designs generally play difficult, maybe with the exception of the Nicklaus Tournament course out at the Amex. So when rounds have been difficult relative to par, our top performers have been Scotty, Rory, Wyndham Clark, Xander, Tommy Fleetwood, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Russell Henley, Colin Morikawa, and Denny McCarthy. All right, so again, a lot of overlap here. Scotty, Xander, Wyndham Clark, I know was up there for 2 of the 3 top 10s. Victor Hovland was top 10 in all 3 difficult, windy, long courses. He's also the defending champion. Makes a lot of sense. Cantley was up there a lot. So a lot of overlap there, again, with your major championship performers. That's what you would expect. Okay, we're going to clear all of the filters. I'll probably keep this at last 36 rounds because I imagine I'm going to be using some filters. But let's go ahead and jump straight into some of these prior leaderboards. Figure out what shots, what types of players generally performed the best around Muirfield. So we took Victor Hovland's win last year. We'll go down to the top 15. Just convenient for ties here. Only one player negative in off the tee. It's surprising to see a couple of players negative in approach, considering that is probably going to be the most important shot type. A few players negative in putting, but really you got a couple of players at negative 1/10. Really, it was just Scotty who missed apparently everything on the greens last year. And if we sort, not the biggest to be gained, 4.8, some 4.5s here, but a decent amount of correlation. You do have a miscut from J-Day, who didn't do anything else well besides drive the golf ball last year, but third, top 25, top 10, top 5, top 10, top 15, middling from Patrick Cantlay. And so it was decent. It was decent. Nothing direct in terms of correlation, but decent. The approach, cut making, but not necessarily as strong as I would have thought. You got a pretty poor performance, a pretty poor made cut from Thomas Dietrich, who hit his irons well and didn't do anything else well. Scotty, of course, gaining 12, just doing ridiculous video game numbers in terms of approach, giving it almost all back in terms of the putter. But, a third, a few top 20s, a top 10 from Adam Shank, but not a whole lot of direct correlation, and which is surprising to me. We look at it around the green, had the strongest correlation in the immediacy, but, you quickly get into the 3s and 2s in terms of the actual strokes gained here. You also have a couple of very high missed cuts, so I don't know if it's going to be around the green that we look at as opposed to, say, scrambling, because there is so much water at Muirfield, 13 holes with water in play. We're probably going to be looking at scrambling as opposed to just around the green, considering there is trouble off the tee. Players could be scrambling from their tee shot. And then if we look at putting, pretty solid. Runner-up, lost in the playoff. A pretty poor performance from Taylor Montgomery, maybe middling depending on your definition. But your winner was third in terms of strokes gained putting, top 10, top 15. One miscut, sure. He just look at the terrible irons that Lingmerth had last year. So little all over the place from last year, to be honest. If we look at 2 years ago and Billy Horschel's win, we sort on the top 17 here due to ties. This is what I generally more think of with Memorial. Not a single player negative in terms of strokes gained approach. Off the tee, hit and miss a little bit. Not a whole lot of high numbers in here. Looks like 4.7 might be the largest. We do have a 7 and around the green and a couple of 5s. But again, a few players negative in terms of around the green. If we sort, okay, so we did have a 5.1 a little bit further down. But again, decent correlation, but not exceptional. A middling from Emiliano Grillo, a terrible clunker of a made cut from Cameron Young. Another middling here, same from Doug Gim, clunker of a made cut. So kind of all over the place. The approach, other than Adam Scott, pretty darn solid. You see Adam Scott was dialed in with his irons and did nothing. Nothing else well or even decent that week. Losing 7 around the green, losing 3 or 3.5 on the greens. He was just very dialed in with his irons, and that's how he made the cut. But look around Adam Scott in the correlation. Top 15, runner-up, top 20. I'll be generous rounding to a top 25 from Adam Shank. Top 20, 3rd, 5th, 5th, 13th, 10th, winner, 5th. This is what I think of when I think of the Memorial, is very solid iron play. Around the green, pretty darn solid, to be fair. You got a good amount of cut making. 5th, 13th, 1st, and then kind of falls off. And then the putter, solid to be expected. So we'll take a look at all 4 of these. Though I am most skeptical, I guess, in around the green, only because I don't know if I want to do around the green or scrambling. But I don't suppose it would take. It wouldn't hurt us to look at the around the green anyway. So off the tee, let's go. Let's just go difficult, because there are some forced layups where players will make sure to find the fairway. There are some forced carries where distance matters, and that obviously we'll look into in the driving and greens and fairways page view. So let's just kind of take a big picture view of off the tee when rounds are difficult relative to par, because that's generally what Memorial is. So when rounds are difficult, our top off the tee players: Scotty, Rory, Patrick Cantlay, Will Zalatoris, Cam Young, Victor Hovland, Siwoo Kim, Sung Jae, Jordan Spieth, and Tony Finau. There's our top 10 in terms of off the tee when rounds are difficult relative to par. I hesitate to use long courses only because, as I mentioned, there are some places where you kind of have to dial it back and be precise, as opposed to just bombing away at Muirfield. So I'm leaning more towards off the tee when it's difficult. Let's take a look at approach. We'll zoom into the last 24 rounds, last 3 months, just get a really, really good, solid view of who's been in good iron form in the immediacy. In the last 24 rounds, our top strokes gained approach players have been Scotty, Corey Connors, Rory, Akshay Bhatia, Siwoo Kim, Xander, Justin Thomas, Russell Henley, Seamus Power, and Hideki. Seamus Power maybe not so much after his poor performance, but at the RBC Canadian. But really, you kind of look at it, it wasn't awful. He was actually pretty darn good with the irons. He was just lackluster on the greens. That's what led to his missed cut. But his iron form has been pretty darn solid dating back to the API. So that's why he rated out so well last week, and he probably will again. Corey Connors, no surprise here, just ball striker extraordinary. We saw that on display this past week at the RBC Canadian. You see he's been just in fuego with his irons lately. Rory, much the same. So these are the kinds of players that are going to be rising come Wednesday evening in my rankings, because I'm going to have probably a pretty good emphasis in strokes gained approach. Let's take a look at around the green, and we could look the last 24 rounds just like we do for approach, but the rough is very difficult to play out of here. We know that it's going to be long. GCSAA tournament fact sheet gave us the figure of 4 inches in terms of the length of the rough, and by the time Sunday rolls around, it's probably going to be longer than that. So our top around the green players in long rough the past 2 years have been Scotty, Russell Henley, Ricky Fowler, Ben Griffin, Brendan Todd, Jordan Spieth, Jason Day, Siwoo, Wyndham Clark, and Alex Noren. And then to finish off the strokes gained page view, we're going to be looking at lightning bent greens. There is a little bit of rain in the forecast that doesn't come in until Sunday. Doesn't look like they're going to get any rain leading into the tournament this week. So in the last 2 years, on lightning bent greens, our top putters have been Denny McCarthy, Harris English, Eric Cole, JT Post and Victor Hovland, Keegan Bradley, Patrick Cantley, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Rogers, and Brendan Todd. It'll be interesting to try and see how much this data matches up with Microsoft Excel. In fact, the vision will be skewed, but I am quite interested in reconciling this. So, performance at the Memorial. We won't have. I mean, we'll just go by the rankings here, but we can try and see if we sort very quickly on putting here at the Memorial. So Eric Cole, it's only 1 year, but he gained 5. So you like to see that. Look at that. Denny McCarthy's played 4 times. He's putt very well, and he's the number 1 lightning bent putter. Seabez, a little bit further down towards the bottom of your screen. He's putt well. Kuchar, off the screen. Sepp Straka, right at the very bottom. At least for my screen, you have to scroll a little bit for you. Sepp Straka there. Let's see. Harris English. Yeah, okay, so he's down here. He's putt okay. There's Brendan Todd towards the bottom half of the top 10. All right, so yeah, I mean it coincides just a little bit. Not bad. Sorry, I know that's a little bit different in terms of pattern of the show that it goes, but I was just quite interested to see, and there was no way I was going to remember this top 10 by the time we get to Microsoft Excel. So it was interesting to reconcile that. I do think it's correct to just look at lightning bent greens, because while they did have 1 round of fast in 2022 and 2021 had a few rounds of fast, majority of the time you see they're lightning. They're lightning bent greens. Now, if we have a few rounds of fast this year, then that would show a little bit of a pattern of them slowing it down. So we'll just have to see. I'm going on the baseline that, generally from 2021 before, they were all lightning, and then something in 2021 caused them to just play to fast. We did have 1 round of fast in 2022, but last year they were all lightning. So I'm going with that base assumption that they want them to be lightning. And that's why we're just looking at lightning bent greens this week. Okay, we get this prepared for fairways and greens. We'll take a look at some driving statistics, fairways, greens. So last year, Victor Hovland, of course, with his distance has a decent amount here, but really there's not a lot. I mean, look, the next 5 are all negative, at least in terms of in relation to the field. Even Scotty Scheffler, negative in terms of distance that week. So it doesn't seem to be as important as I thought it might have been from last night. Hey, Awaken, thanks for jumping in the chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully things have been well. You had a successful RBC Canadian. You followed my good plays, such as Tom Kim, and Kevin Yu was a decent suggestion, and you avoided the Martin Lairds and the Seamus Powers that I was also advocating for. So hopefully all's been well, and we're going to move to a 3-week stretch of 3 premier events on the PGA Tour. Thanks for jumping in chat. Let's have a great week. We are going to try. I've certainly had some close calls in the outrights. Bryson, runner-up at the PGA. Now, the Charles Schwab was just an unmitigated disaster on my part. I got seemingly nothing right in that tournament, so that one was just bad. And then I had the Tom Kim outright. He made a huge charge over the weekend. Comes up just a tad bit short. So we're going to see if we can't find the right players again this week that perhaps will give us some value. If we look and look more closely at last year's Memorial, Only one player negative in terms of good drives gained, but look, not a single player negative in greens. These greens are small. They play smaller than they actually are because of how fast they are, how firm they are. So if you're hitting greens here, you are going to be just fine. I mean, you see Scotty Scheffler, who lost a bajillion on the green last year. I think it was, 9? We just saw it. He lost, 8.5 or 9 strokes on the greens. He still finishes third because he hit every single green. If we sort on it, 3rd, 12th, 9th, 16th, 7th, 16th, 4th, falls off just a tad towards the bottom half here of maybe the top 10 or 12 performers in greens. But you hit these greens enough, you're just simply going to be rising on the leaderboard. These greens are tough to hit. Interested in looking at good drives gained, not necessarily as strong as I would have thought. Sam Ryder, not that great of a finish. Jason Day, missed cut. Davis Thompson, not that great of a finish, and they were pretty darn solid in good drives. Don't think there's much to gain here in fairways. Most players are putting a whole lot of emphasis into finding the fairways anyway. So not a whole lot there, I don't think. It really does look like it's the greens, at least from last year. If we look at 2022 in Billy Ho's win, Billy Ho, negative in distance. Now, more players are positive in terms of driving distance, but you still have your fair share of negative. So I don't know how much driving distance is actually going to matter. You got a few players negative in good drives gained and in the greens. But again, look at Billy Ho, 12.5 on the greens, wins the tournament. Joaquin Niemann, 11.5, finishes third. Corey Connors, top 15. Top 30 from Pat Perez, top 30/middling, depending on your definition. John Rahm, top 10. Top 5 from Zalatoris, a top 10. Sure, Doug Gim was a clunker of a made cut. Top 20, top 10. It looks like it's just greens. Looks like it's just greens from this page view. So, let me get this prepped for the next thing we want to look at, which is scoring. We're going to look at greens in a few different ways. We'll also look at scrambling. We just don't get scrambling, the scrambling metrics in a historical sense. So we'll also look at some scrambling, but it's more so in the greens. So the first thing we'll do, when scoring is difficult relative to par, your top greens gained players have been Scotty, Xander, Colin Morikawa, Cam Young, Victor Hovland, Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, Sepp Straka, Tom Kim, and Patrick Cantlay. We definitely can look at greens gained. Despite the small sample size, I actually do kind of like looking at greens on Jack Nicklaus courses. So your top greens gained players on Jack Nicklaus designs: Scotty, Xander, Connors, Finau, Sepp Straka, Zalatoris, Lowry, Cantlay, Sungjae, and JT, Justin Thomas. Interesting. Again, I would not use this metric and filter combination, but I think it's useful information just to have in the back of your mind, or at least to jot it down as you prepare your lineups and maybe some wagers throughout the week. We can take a look at greens. I hesitate a little bit with long courses just because there are some shorter holes here, shorter par 4s. Some of the par 5s are attackable in 2, so I do hesitate a little bit on this one. I think I would much honestly prefer the Jack Nicklaus filter to the long course filter, but on long courses, on long courses, our top greens gained players: Connors, Xander, Scotty Scheffler, Tony Finau, Andrew Putnam, Justin Thomas, Ben On, Cameron Young, Wyndham Clark, and Colin Morikawa. I remember what I was going to look at. Might be perhaps an odd way to think about it, but this rough is long. It is long and it is very, very difficult to play out of. So we could perhaps take a look at greens when the rough is long. In those situations, Scotty, Corey Connors, Lucas Glover, Wyndham Clark, Rory, Andrew Putnam, Xander, Hideki, Adam Schenk, and Colin Morikawa. So Scheffler up here, clearly. Connors has been up here a lot. That's kind of what they do. I mean, Scotty Scheffler's the premier ball striker in the world. Corey Connors is a damn good ball striker. Wyndham Clark's been up here. Rory's been up here. I think this is the only one that Lucas Glover was. Could be wrong with that, but Xander's been up here quite a bit. Adam Schenk was up here, I think, once or twice. Morikawa. So just to give you an idea on no matter the circumstance, difficulty, long rough, Jack Nicklaus courses, who are the players that are most likely to gain greens in regulation. Something else to think about, scrambling. I would default to using scrambling difficult relative to par. So your top scramblers in those conditions: Tommy Fleetwood, Denny McCarthy, who's played generally really well around Muirfield, Max Homa, Andrew Putnam, Mac Hughes, Adam Schenk, Brennan Todd, Alex Noren, Matt Kuchar, and Patrick Cantlay. There's your top scramblers when scoring is difficult relative to par. All right. We'll go to scoring, birdies, bogeys. There are a few eagles, or at least a couple of eagle opportunities. Par 5 5th, 2%. Par 5 15th, 3%. So there are a few eagles. We could look at birdies or better. But I definitely think bogey avoidance is where we want to start, considering not a single player negative in terms of bogey avoidance. In the top 15 last year, pars, except on the par 5s, pars are generally really good scores around Muirfield. We look at bogey avoidance from last year. I mean, yeah, top 20, 4th, 5th, 5th, 12th. A couple of, more poor performances than you might think. So this isn't actually as strong as I would have thought in terms of the bogey avoidance. We look at birdies gained. Your winner was higher up here. 16th, 4th, 1st, 16th, 30th, 16th. A little bit better in the birdies gained, surprisingly, despite the fact that you have more players negative in the birdies gained. Spieth, Hodges, both top 15, being negative in terms of the birdies gained. Interesting. 2022 scoring. Looking at the top 17, again, only one player negative in bogey avoidance, but you see the 3 players that are negative in birdies gained, only 2/10, so, basically field average. Now, Billy Horschel was much, much more in the bogey avoidance that year. He led in bogey avoidance. 1st, 13th, 3rd, 10th, 2nd, 5th, surrounded by a 53rd and a 37th, which isn't great. Birdies gained, not as strong. So we got 2 years. Last year it seemed like it was the birdies gained. 2022 seemed like it was the bogey avoidance. We'll probably have both in the mixed condition model, to be honest with you. And again, this is just me being transparent as a statistician and data analyst. If I am using a scoring filter like birdies are better, bogey avoidance opportunities, I'm always going to prefer, when applicable, to a scoring filter, easy or difficult relative to par. So, because the Memorial is difficult, we'll take a look at bogey avoidance first. I think that's probably where I'm leaning more or feel more confident in. So your top bogey avoiders when rounds are difficult relative to par: Scotty, Tommy Fleetwood, J-Day, Matt Fitzpatrick, Xander, Rory, Lucas Glover, Denny McCarthy, Max Homa, and Victor Hovland. If we look at birdies or better gained, the same difficult relative to par: Wyndham Clark, Scotty, Rory, Hovland, Cam Young, Keegan Bradley, Patrick Cantlay, Sam Burns, Davis Riley, and Sepp Straka. Just a reminder for anyone who has joined the show late, or for you awaken since you're in chat, Pearson Coody did not qualify. So when Fantasy National loaded the field in, late Friday night, Saturday morning, whenever they did, Pearson Coody was listed as in because of the Aeon Swing 5, and then he got jumped just, due to performance. Bobby Mack winning puts him in, etc. So that's why he has the star. He is not in the field this week. More than likely we're going to be looking at both birdies are better gained and bogey avoidance would be my guess. I'm leaning towards the bogey avoidance having the higher percentage just because pars are good scores around Muirfield. Having said that, I've mentioned it quite a bit now, at least this week, and I'm doing a lot of research around this lately, working in close collaboration with Gabe. It might just be finding the birdies, considering that is what catapults you in these DFS contests, at least on DraftKings. So I'm doing a whole lot of research around that in my spare time. Alrighty. Let's move to proximity. I don't think there's anything here for us, but I wanted to, it's always good to double check and make sure your inclinations are correct. I've been wrong several times on inclinations. Total prox is decent up here at the top, especially from Scotty Scheffler. Does fall off a little bit the rest of the top 15. But look at this 175 to 200. The two most prominent ranges are 150 to 200, separated in the 20 by that 25-yard barrier. 150 to 175 and 175 to 200. So if we look at last year's Memorial, these two players here, Adam Schenk with a -4, that's across the tournament. It's essentially field average. Adam Scott, essentially field average. We only have two players that were bad. Lipsky was horrendous from 175 to 200, but really pretty darn solid. Think about it in the top 15. If we sort on that range, kind of falls apart a little bit. You got a few miscuts pretty high up here, but your winner was third from that range. Just out of curiosity, we sort on total proximity. He was pretty darn solid on total prox. A third, a top 20, and a win, and a runner-up, but everything else is pretty lackluster around him. 200 plus, not really. So maybe the 175 to 200 here, maybe from last year. 2022 and proximity kind of okay, falls apart in 2022 in terms of the 175 to 200. Total prox is still kind of something. Look at that, second first. That's always a great way to start a review. Second first or first second. So hard to ignore that, but just kind of some cut making in here. Other than these two and maybe a top 10 and a top 5. I don't know. I don't feel confident with the total prox. I don't feel confident really with much in terms of proximity anyway. So we might come back to this once we go into Microsoft Excel and really dig into the data of Muirfield by a raw number usage. I'm just going to skip it for now. I don't feel anything jumps off the page enough to warrant it. And feel free to jump in chat or put it in the comments if you disagree, if you think something did warrant some attention in the proximity. Moving to par threes, it's surprising considering 3 of the par threes measured to this range, 1 to here, but the majority of our strokes gained, at least last year, came in the 175 to 200. It's a little bit surprising, but not a whole lot was gained, really. Not a whole lot was gained in terms of these par threes, at least from the upper echelon. Like your top 10s, Shank, Rory, Ricky, they played them well, but like Victor Hovland was a 1.2, McCarthy was a 1.2, Scheffler was essentially field average. There wasn't a whole lot to be gained here in the par threes last year. And if we look at 2022, par threes. A little bit different of a story, I guess. A little bit more there. Oh yeah, so it's quite a bit more. So maybe 2023 was a bit of an outlier. We'll have to check Excel here shortly. A couple top 20s, runner up, third, fifth, first, a little bit lower, further down. Just out of curiosity, what's 2021 look like? Par threes. Patrick Reed was really good. Yeah, okay. We might be looking at 2023 being a slight outlier. Definitely no particular range. Or, said another way, it's really in these two ranges. That's it. I know one of them looks like they get shortened to under 175, but really if you kind of look at it, it's, gosh dang it, it's really in just these two. Those two ranges. So let me get this prepped for the par fours. So our top, I'm just going to look at total par threes, but like I did, I believe it was for the Charles Schwab, have a focus on just these two ranges if you want. Yeah, honestly, I might do 5% in both of them. Anybody stand out, good or bad? Yeah, maybe Hideki. Hideki's been pretty mediocre at these two lengths. He's been pretty good at the shorter ones. So this is a situation where he would rise if we looked at just total par threes. Sorry. Looked at total par threes, he would rise. But if we're only solely looking at the two specific ranges, he would fall a little bit. Players you should probably consider Obear, 24th and 2nd. Lee Hodges, very solid, 5th and 11th. Denny McCarthy, Batia, Russell Henley, 4th and 1st. Solid, very solid. Brian Harmon again, 9th and 20th. Solid. Seabass, 15th and 18th. So there's a few names in the par threes. So let's move to par fours. We know these are going to carry a decent amount of weight. The majority of them come in the 450 to 500 range. Yeah, I mean, they're just solid. 16th, 24th, 1st, 3rd, 2nd, 5th, 9th. You just got to play them pretty darn solid. We sort on the particular range. Maybe not as strong as I would have thought. 41st, 38th, 41st. Maybe it's just par fours, especially considering how spread out the par fours are in terms of where they fall in those range buckets. You see Billy Ho really took advantage of the 450 to 5s in 2022. Led, but kind of falls off in terms of correlation. 2023, let's just prep this for the par 5s. We're just going to look at total par 4s, and then we'll see if something stands out in Excel. Your top total par 4 performers the last 24 rounds: Scheffler, Xander, Rory, Straka, Tommy Fleetwood, Glover, Taylor Pendrith, Tom Hoagie, Alex Noren, and Colin Morikawa. And then very quickly, par 5s, because we still have plenty to cover. Par 5s, last year were just in these two ranges. Looks like the majority of it came here. Yeah. Yeah, you had a few players negative in the 500 to 550, but not in the 550 to 6. And then 2022, par 5s. Yeah, much more the same, really. A lot of numbers to be gained in this range here. So, on par 5s, 550 to 600 yards, your top performers have been Scotty, Rory, Thomas Dietrich, Xander, Billy Ho, Cam Davis, Taylor Moore, Justin Thomas, Nick Dunlap, and Cam Young. All right. We'll bring this back to the strokes gained page view. Let's move to Microsoft Excel. We still have quite a bit to cover and running a little bit shorter on time. So now that we went through some prior leaderboards, let's take a look at some extreme detail around Muirfield and the Memorial. See where the strokes gained come into play, what metrics really rise and whatnot. So looking at some strokes gained here, again, most important shot type has been approach. It has been very, very consistent, and then 2022 was a slightly high outlier, but look at the other 4 years around it. I mean, just extremely consistent, which as a statistician, that's what I want to see. I want to see a consistent metric. Even if it's not important, I want to see consistency. That way I know how important or not it is. So pretty solid. Look at the around the green. It is quite comfortably outweighing the off the tee. A little bit surprising to me, but with Muirfield being so difficult, makes some sense. And it's also been fairly consistent with a low outlier last year. So maybe I need to think about around the green a little bit more than what I have been. It's very possible. Interesting to see that the distance has year over year, I mean consistently for the last 5 years, you see it here, consistently year over year increase gradually in importance. Okay. But in this page view, it is clearly about the greens. No doubt about that. It is about the greens and regulation. So this makes me think maybe to put a little bit of emphasis in off the tee. I don't know if I would necessarily separate out the distance, although it is compelling to see how it has risen year over year in terms of importance, just out of curiosity. So it's a little bit higher than the full field consistent course on the PGA Tour. Yeah, look at that. Around the green is 60%. So I definitely need to probably factor in around the green more than what I'm thinking of. But yeah, look at all the strokes gained in the greens. That's where the majority in this page view is. Looking at scoring, it's very rare that you find the bogeys outweigh the birdies, but that's what you have here. However, much like the driving distance, take a look at the birdies gained. It has gone up year over year. Now last year it did fall, but it was on an upward trajectory, whereas the bogey avoidance has been on the downward trajectory year over year. 3.5, 3.3, then falls all the way to 2.5, 2.4, 2.25. Perhaps we are looking more so in the birdies are better gained. It's possible. Like I said, I believe both of them will end up in the mixed condition model. But this is pretty compelling to see how the bogey avoidance has fallen in significance year over year. Moving to par threes, a little bit less than half coming in the 175 to 200, which is quite interesting because 3 of the par threes fall into this range. But it says just to look at the par threes in general. So that's what we'll do. Last year being a pretty low outlier, if we remove that, 1.96, which is 39% more important. Whoa. Okay. That is with the low outlier removed. As we bring it back in, it's still 25%. So maybe some par threes need to be factored in. It looks like it's just going to be these two ranges. Although, well, I saw the 0.42 and the 0.52 and thought that maybe the 150 to 175 was a factor, but look how much it hasn't been a couple of years. Really, it's kind of just being propped up by this 1 year. So yeah, maybe like a 5% in each of these ranges, maybe. Interesting. Something I'll have to think about as I prep my mixed condition model. Moving to par fours. Just a massive amount in this 450 to 500. More than half. So this right here would signify that we would look at par fours and separate out the 450 to 5. Considering this range is more than double the next important. Okay. It sure didn't look like that from the prior leaderboards, but man, that is quite compelling when you put the raw numbers to it. So, and then in the par fives, surprisingly, at least surprisingly for me, the 500 to 550 is actually somewhat close. Somewhat close. This is still a little bit more than half, but man, this has been pretty darn consistent. So, interesting. Interesting. Alrighty. So there's a look at some deep, detailed data around the Memorial the past 5 years. Let's take a quick look at my mixed condition model from last year, see what I looked at, see how good it was results-based and predictability and all that, see some of the changes we want to think about making to this year's mixed condition model. So last year, only 3 missed cuts in my top 20, so I would be very happy to repeat that performance. Now, yes, it's a much smaller field and a much smaller cut, but if I only had 1 or 2 missed cuts in my top 20, I would be happy with that. It is golf; crazy things happen. The winner was just at the bottom of my top 20. Okay. I had a 7% Matt Fitzpatrick in my top 20, who finished 10th. That was solid. That was extremely solid. Somehow Rory was only a 10%, or at least projected 10% owned. Top 10, solid. Spieth at 10%, top 5, solid. So this appears like it worked pretty well. So what did I look at? At 20% approach, makes a whole lot of sense. Most important shot type, in my opinion, in golf and at Muirfield. I had 15% in around the green with the filter of long rough. Remember, that's what we looked at tonight. Okay. I think that's probably a little bit heavy, but I mean, it's hard to ignore what we just saw in the comparison course chart. Still think it's a tad bit heavy, but certainly more than the 5% that I was kind of default thinking about. 15% in greens when it's difficult. Makes all the sense in the world. Greens are extremely difficult to hit here. Memorial's extremely difficult in general. Makes a lot of sense. Par 5s at 15%. Probably too much. Although players are going to have to play them well, I think that's a tad bit too heavy. 10% in bogey avoidance. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But as we talked about, perhaps we need to put some birdies or better in there because I don't have any. That's probably a mistake on my part. 10% par 3s, sure. Maybe split out the 175 to 200 and 200 to 225, but par 3s, sure. Putting, I only had 5% on fast and lightning bent. I think that's a mistake because we're just going to look at lightning bent this year. To round out the mixed condition model, I had 5% in total par 4s, 5% in 450 to 500. Makes a lot of sense. So how predictive are these? With a smaller field, only 120 players, I'm looking for something in the low 40s. I normally say low 50s. A smaller field, I'm looking for low 40s, maybe even an upper 30s. So approach, very solid, useful. Around the green wasn't. Okay. Greens, solid. So that's just, again, reinforcing my belief that we want to look at greens on that page view. Par 5s, okay, I guess. 41, not the best. Not terrible, though. Bogey avoidance was good. Par 3s were not. Total par 3s were not. So I do think we are going to be much... it's going to behoove us to look at 175 to 225 par 3s, not total par 3s. Putting was not good, but again, I looked at fast and lightning bent instead. I think it's just lightning bent. And the par 4s were pretty darn good. 450 to 500, maybe not as much, but the par 4s total were solid in terms of predictability. So overall, this was a pretty darn good mixed condition model. Definitely have room for improvement. You don't want any, miscuts in your top 20. You want the winner to be first, etc., etc. But this was pretty darn good. So we're gonna have to maybe not necessarily mimic it completely, but we're gonna take a lot from last year's and bring it over to this year's mixed condition model. All right, we are going to finish the show off on a Monday night, as we always do, with the early look file, and I will end the show off showing you some research that I posted to social media. So at Muirfield, the past 5 years, who have been our top performers at various metrics? So we're going to start with approach. No surprise, Scotty leading the way with his approach. Davis Riley's 2 for 2. Adam Schenk has hit his irons very, very well here. Morikawa. What is not factored in is the workday from 2020, because that course was set up completely different than what it was the following week for the Memorial. Just giving you that information. This is not including Colin Morikawa's workday win. Cantley been solid. Xander solid with the irons. I need to remove Davis Thompson. He is not in the field. Seabass has been pretty solid with his irons. Lowry, Tagala. So there's a look at the top iron players the past 5 years here at Muirfield. Let's take a look at the top putters very quickly. We did this a little bit earlier, but just very, very quickly. McCarthy, Seabass, Kuchar's putt well here. Sepstraka's putt well here. J-Day, but not a lot of success. Putnam, but not a lot of success. Homa's been okay here. Jordan Spieth, Victor, Cantley, Billy Ho. Siwoo's putt well. Siwoo's been good just generally here. All right. Definitely want to look at greens. We don't want to ignore that. So your top greens gained players the past 5 years, specifically at Muirfield. Xander. Zalatoris, it's only one time. Scotty. Cantley. Schenk. Morikawa. Lowry. Rose a little bit less in terms of success. Seabass, plenty of greens. Siwoo, plenty of greens. Rory. Connors. Billy Ho. Fitzpatrick, who's been quite Jekyll and Hyde, either missing the cut or top fiving, seemingly. Interesting to note that. We're going to skip the birdies, bogeys, par threes. Let's take a look at par fours. Just very quickly. Spieth, why he's had so much success at the Memorial, taking care of the par fours. McCarthy, Cantley, Scheffler, Billy Ho. Gosh dang it. Billy Ho, Xander, Rory. These guys who have played year over year and had so much success at the Memorial. Look at what they're doing in the par fours. They're just taking advantage of them. That's what you got to do. Lastly, I don't know. What do you think? It's par fives or 550 to 600? I've spent all week thinking it's the 550 to 600, but man, it actually might be the par fives, just total par fives. I'll go with 550 to 600. If I change it, come Wednesday night in the mixed condition model, I'll explain why then. Scotty, Cantley, Finau, a little bit less in terms of success, but he's played this length of par fives pretty well. Lowry, Siwoo, Tagala, been good here. Ricky's been good here. Homa's been good here. Harmon a little bit less in terms of success. There's your top par 5 performers from 550 to 600. All right, to finish the show, I do want to provide you all some information or some background to the research that I posted to social media earlier today. So let's take a look at the what I call the winter form, or how well players have been playing leading into the Memorial. Now, you can disagree with how far back I go. I just went back to the beginning of the calendar year for the century. Victor Hovland last year, 4 top 10s and another top 15, a couple other top 20s. I mean, he was just fantastic form. Billy Ho had 2 top 10s, another top 15. So the blue is top 15s, blues are top 10s, yellows are top 15s. So look at all the recent performance that these guys had. Solid. I mean, just extremely solid. I mean, even Patrick Cantlay, a T23 at the PGA, his previous event is a pretty good showing. Look at John Rahm and all the top 10s he had. Cantlay in 2019, all the top 10s. So there were a couple of outliers. Jason Duffner, this is essentially like one putt that falls or doesn't fall, where he probably turns a 11th or a 12th into a top 10. So I mean, he's pretty much right there. Look at all the form he was in. Several top 15s, a couple more top 25s. The one true outlier was David Lingmerth. He had 1 top 15. But, I mean, going all the way back to 2012 and Tiger, the winner of the Memorial had multiple top 10s in that calendar year, meaning since the century. Had multiple top 10s and, a few other top 15s or top 20s. So really focus on the players who have played extremely well this year. Not necessarily win, but have just consistently, tournament after tournament after tournament, have been in contention or, have at least played their way into some top 10s and top 15s. So that's the first thing I want to highlight for you all. We'll take a look at the winner matrix, which is how well players have played at that specific course leading into their win. You look at Victor. He hadn't really played all that well leading into his win, but he at least had made some cuts. Billy Horschel, the year prior, did not play very well, but he had at least made some cuts. Cantlay made some cuts to, some better than others, obviously, but at least made some cuts. There were 2 outliers in terms of previous form. John Rahm missed the cut in 2017, did not play 2018 or 2019, and then wins in 2020. And the true outlier was Hideki. He wins the Memorial the first time he plays the course. So those were the 2 outliers there. But generally speaking, even David Lingmerth had at least made some cuts at the Memorial. William McGirt made some cuts at the Memorial. Bryson DeChambeau made his only cut the time prior. So I believe I put it on social media that 10 of the 12 had at least made the cut their previous played Memorial tournament. It doesn't have to be the previous year. You see Bryson, you see Matt Kuchar, see Tiger, but they at least had a modicum of success. At least made a cut at Jack's place before they won. And then the last couple of things I want to show you in terms of research. Hey, good evening, Darnell. Jumping in right at the end of the show. Thanks for jumping in chat. Hopefully all's went well and you had a successful RBC Canadian. I want you to notice, even though it doesn't seem like off the tee is as big of a deal around Muirfield, every single winner, look at this, every single champion of the Memorial gained off the tee their previous event leading into the Memorial, regardless of whatever event and wherever they finished. You look at Billy Ho, missed the cut at the Charles Schwab, didn't do much else well, but he at least drove it somewhat decently. Everyone gained off the tee their previous event, and everyone gained in greens their previous event leading into the Memorial. All 12, regardless of the tournament, regardless of how they fared. They all gained in those two metrics: off the tee and greens. So those are the 4 things that I posted to social media. I wanted to give you a little bit of info and proof around that, and the pattern to the winners that I have seen historically at Muirfield. And I went ahead and posted the players that fit the criteria in this week's field based on, multiple top 10s, at least made a cut in their previous Memorial played, gained off the tee, gained in greens. So if you want to see the list of those players, I put that over on social media. I believe I put it on X. I don't think I put it on Instagram, but I put that over on X for your all's perusal. Thanks to Awaken and Darnell for jumping in chat. It's much appreciated. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. Love what I do, giving you an in-depth look at sports statistics from a statistician and data analyst's view, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Reminder to go support Gabe, follow him over on social media. He has a lot of great content that he provides for his viewers, his followers as well. And subscribe to that article, because if you do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat on Wednesday nights after the DFS Tactics show. So thanks again for all the support, for all the wagers you've made so far this week for the Memorial, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Memorial. And until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.